Hi, everybody. Today I'm speaking with a pioneer of regenerative agriculture in Britain. As a brief introduction, Paul Cherry farms with his son Alex in North Hertfordshire and manages a diverse estate which includes arable, livestock, pasture raised eggs, and a thriving farm shop and lunch venue. And alongside this, Paul co founded Groundswell, which is now the UK's flagship regenerative agriculture event. In fact, I think it's been referred to as agriculture's answer to Glastonbury, and I can admit that I think that's a pretty fair comparison. And today we're going to talk a bit about regen agriculture and also the role of Groundswell and where Paul and his family will be going with that next. So welcome, Paul. It's great to have you to chat to today.
Thank you very much for having me.
So I think to kick off, it would be really good to explain to people new to the concept, how do you define regenerative agriculture?
Right. Well, regenerative agriculture is born of a desire to not just carry on with the usual stuff. Conventional agriculture basically hasn't changed for thousands of years. But what's happened recently is that we've realized there's an awful lot wrong with the food system and with the way we treat our soils. And we do have an alternative, and that alternative is to be lighter on the soil, keep growing plants in the soil so you've got living roots, integrate livestock into arable rotations, build soil fertility rather than just keep on adding fertility, inorganic fertility, and hoping for the best. That, in a nutshell, is what regen is.
And is the reason why it's become so important that people are squeezing the land for more and more, which in turn has meant more fertilizer, more insecticide, more things to try and stop the beasties and make things grow more quickly, which is over time really hurting the land and potentially the livestock and the environment around it.
And precisely that. But it's not only squeezing the land, it's squeezing our resources. The fertilizer industry is a huge user of energy. But the more we do to our land, the more bigger and bigger tractors, bigger and bigger machines, bigger everything. It's getting incredibly energy hungry. And the amount of food that we're growing on that same patch of land is plateauing all the time. And whilst we've been incredibly successful at feeding this quickly growing world population, the world population had doubled in my lifetime, and yet the price of wheat has been going steadily down ever since, in real terms, ever since I started farming 40 years ago. So that gives you an indication of how successful farmers have been at growing food. I think it's now our responsibility to take a good look at not only how much food we're producing, but how we produce it and what it's costing the planet. And so, and we have this opportunity. We have an amazing opportunity to do something about it.
And when did you realize that you needed to change things? And when you did decide, what sort of reception did you get among the people who you would tend to interact with and talk about this new venture of yours?
Yes, it's very interesting. Farming, you can't hide when you're a farmer. So your neighbour's always looking over the hedge, and we look over our neighbour's hedges, and that's sort of the fun of the whole thing. But the ideas have really come from America, where we can all picture in our mind the dust storms on the prairies, and we can picture, but what we can't picture is that it's still happening. Where they plowed up the prairies are this incredible grassland grazed by bison, millions of bison, and then along comes John Deere and his plow. And once you turn that soil over, it becomes incredibly vulnerable. Now, and that's why you get dust storms, and that's why you get soil washing into the Mississippi. And once it's in the Gulf of Mexico, it's gone forever. And that's the sort of basic concept. Now, it's happening here. It's happening wherever we cultivate land. But because we don't have that extreme weather, it happens much more slowly. But it's still happening. We're still losing soil into our seas all around the world, not just here. So the Americans have spearheaded the regen story, if you like, by stopping ploughing, by doing all the things that regen is, if you like. And so my brother actually went over to a conference 18 years ago and came back and said, this is where I would we were farming together then. We were never happy with the sort of way farming felt. It always felt like you were just squeezing the land too hard. So this was an opportunity to do something a little bit different. We had Americans who could help us. We thought, let's do something a bit more. That's when Groundswell was born.
Interesting. And we're going to go on to talk more specifically about Groundswell, but just to think about the risks involved. So all entrepreneurs in one way or another are on a journey which will involve risk. And how would you think about that in the context of the journey that you've taken with you and your brother and son?
Yes, the risks are reduced by the fact that you spend less money. Farmers have got very good, particularly in the days of subsidies, which are now slightly behind us. When you're being subsidized, you get very good at spending a lot of money. There are a lot of people who are very keen to take your money, incidentally, whether it's buying a tractor or buying fertilizer or buying fuel. So principally, going down this route means we in the very long term, you're hoping to build fertility in your soil, so you shouldn't need to use so much fertilizer and indeed sprays and chemicals. That's a long game, if you like. But in the short term, you're spending less. Now you may be growing, yes, less. The yield will drop to start with, but if you've spent less, then it shouldn't matter so much. Now, there's still an awful lot of risk involved, so you have to manage that risk. But particularly with the way things are at the moment, with costs massively increasing, then it's an easier decision to make. Just reduce
Yes,
it.
that's interesting. Of course, because if you have fewer enormous tractors or enormous machines and so on, in fact, with the kind of energy crisis and so on that we've seen recently, you are less impacted by that than others might be in a more traditional sense.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
Yeah. Yeah. Okay. Let's move on to Groundswell. And the first question I have to ask is, how did the name come up? Because it is a seriously great name. And when we were thinking about Netwealth and what we would call our business, we went round the houses, we had a few different ideas, and I actually think Netwealth is a great name, but I'm really interested in the name Groundswell because I think it really captures what you're trying to do. But I'd love to just hear what gave you the idea in the first place.
Yeah, Groundswell is very much a family business. There's all 6 directors are members of my, and all those years ago, 10, 12 years ago, when we were kicking the idea around, somebody was having a conversation and said, you end up talking about this groundswell of opinion. Wherever they were talking, said, stop right there. You've got it. That's it. That's an A, really. And
Yeah.
so somebody shouted at us, well, of course, because it's not only the groundswell of opinion, it's all about the ground. So that's fantastic. And all the best ideas in farming come from farmers. They don't come from top down. They don't come from the industry. They come from farmers tinkering around, fiddling around with stuff. And making
Yes.
So
That's interesting because now maybe we could talk a bit about what does Groundswell actually involve, because you've just said the ideas come from farmers, and actually, yes, you have 10,000 plus visitors, but they are coming to see lots of individuals, aren't they, who are talking about the approaches they've taken. Just explain a bit about what the event involves.
right. So on one level, it's a B2B conference we have 10 speaker stages, panels of farmers, panels of ideas, scientists, ecologists, students, politicians, royalty, they're all lurking. And so we had these sessions running all through the day. But in between the sessions, there are exhibitors exhibiting not only their wares, but also we have moving exhibits. We have a field where tractors are trying a direct seed drill, a seed planter that is putting seed straight into uncultivated ground in amongst a cattle crop, which is basically a sort of summer plant, if you like, which is part of the sort of groundswell, part of the regen principle, if you like. And then we have safaris. We call them safaris. If you can call going to look for dung beetles a safari, then that's exactly what we do.
I never knew dung could be so interesting until I went on your dung safari. I'm a big fan.
It's gripping, isn't it? And if you want to learn about what goes on in the hedge, we have a hedgerow safari or a pond safari, and lots of diversions that so you're not just sitting on the bum watching people talking. Then there is that thing it's a 2-day show in a field, and so in the evening we go really large on the entertainment side. So it's very much, that's where the Glastonbury thing came in. There's music and there's dancing and there's lots to drink and there's amazing food. We're very fussy about our street food attenders, if you like. So trying to make farming fun and cool again. And that is, it's great. Farming can be a pretty lonely old industry. So for farmers and their families to come to this, it's much more fun than just going to look at a standard farming event where you're probably going to be sold a tractor or a machine that you probably can't
Yes.
afford. This is much more interactive. And I always say that one of the things that gives me the most satisfaction is seeing people in the queue for coffee just striking up. You'll learn as much from somebody you meet queuing for coffee. Farmers are great at sharing ideas. They're not competing, so they'll share. And that this is very
Yes.
much the sort of ethos of the event.
Yeah, that's interesting. And just related to that, actually, I think, it's almost like you're describing a sort of safe space for farmers, but a kind of cool, fun, safe space. And it leads on to this idea of, if farming is a lonely endeavor, then actually this is a way to bring farmers together. Some will be from Scotland, others will be from deep in the south of the country and all over. I think that's one of the things, isn't it? That people are sharing their insights, which may be quite individual to them. And then they get excited about the fact that other people somewhere in a completely different part of the country are starting to think about how they could do that themselves.
Yes. I should add that people do come from all across the world to come. So you've got, so that's everything that you've just said is true. But so often the story is better told by somebody from Sweden or from Australia or Argentina or Brazil. It just gives it more credence. And the thing about farming is that whilst conditions may vary enormously, the principles stay the same. And so you've got that as a sort of basis, and then all the new ideas you can build on the top of that sort of principle of growing food as cheaply as possible. And there are a million different ways of doing exactly that. So picking up those ideas from people is amazing. And it's this new generation of farmers, sons, daughters, relations who are coming in to the industry where they're not expecting the subsidy to support the industry. They're much braver. They can see the opportunities. And they're probably going to be braver than, dare I say it, my generation has been about doing different
Yes.
things. Hopefully coming to ground.
And partly through actual need, and partly through, do you mean the next generation just being more clear about the environmental issues and the requirement to change the practices?
Yes, I think everybody, but 10 years ago, probably quite a few doubters. Now here we are, everybody's prepared to accept that with climate change, whether you talk about carbon, whether you talk about the environmental issues are loud and clear on, and so it's up to us to help people do something about it. And farmers are pretty well positioned to be able to. Not all industries can do something about it. Of course, you can save the amount of fuel you're using, that's the thing. But farmers with the land can build carbon in their soils, and that makes us pretty unique. We can
Yeah.
do lots more than just save a bit of energy.
And talking about the sort of generational shift, and obviously you and Alex and the broader family are sort of representative of that. To what extent, if we were to say the younger generation is more technologically native than we might be, how does that play out in terms of how younger generations of farmers share ideas, spread the word, galvanize this movement? Have you seen some of that? Probably through Groundswell as much as other things.
Very much, and yes, we are- we're all on WhatsApp groups for really quite detailed bits and pieces where you're sharing knowledge, and so that is a sort of probably the easy bit. But the other social media groups are very much alive, and it's the young who are leading all of that. They
Yeah.
will, and because they want to not just want to share the idea, they want to probably sell something as well. But that doesn't matter. They really well and very cheaply, and
Yeah.
and I think you must see it with your Netwealth client all the time. the young just want to be so much more entrepreneurial than we did. And so they've got this opportunity. I think there's also something rather lovely about being on the land as well. And so that building an opportunity where you do get that farming lifestyle is pretty
Yes.
so
Yes.
uh,
And
we see it loud and clear.
what would you say about, while there's this huge enthusiasm for regenerative agriculture for the reasons that you're saying, where there's total recognition that something needs to be done, where you start to see some of the big names get on the bandwagon, because we know that organic farming has been, in a sense, that's been around for longer, and the Soil Association has certain requirements to have that badge. But is that the same for regen, or are there risks involved with keeping the wrong company by mistake?
Yes, the Soil Association has been around since 40 something. There's been the organic movement has been incredibly successful because they're very specific, and if you're organic, you have to abide by a very strict set of rules. People will come with clipboards onto a farm and make sure you're abiding by those rules. Regen is much, much broader than that. And Groundswell certainly doesn't, we on the regen community don't want to impose restrictions on people to say, oh, there's therefore you're not a regen farm. But equally, if you're a big food company, it's very easy for you to claim that your farmers are regen, even if they're in the dabbling on one of the sort of 5 principles of regenerative agriculture you're talking about. But all farmers are regen, therefore our potatoes, flour, whatever, is better because of that. And this is called greenwashing, and you are aware of it. And we're nervous of that direction of travel, but there's not much we can do about it at the moment because regen is such a loose community, if you like, a loose set of rules.
Yes.
So very, very difficult. But so we've got to be careful. There's an awful lot of good going on, but I just think that's one of the things we are watching very carefully to see how things are going to sort of change.
Yes. Yes. And I'm sure they're watching you quite carefully. Yeah. Interesting. And related to that, in terms of raising awareness among those of us who are not living and breathing farming every day, one of the things it feels that Groundswell does is capture the imagination and build a sort of community. And so that people, maybe, I know we can't second guess labeling in a supermarket, but it might mean that people are more incentivized to go and seek out the farm shop, or to really understand a bit better where their food comes from and whether regen does actually fit with whatever product they're buying. Are you seeing this concept of sort of citizen science of it?
Yes, I think it goes back to what I was saying earlier about people being more knowledgeable and knowing that there is another way of growing stuff. They may not. People don't want to get bogged down with the technicalities, and certainly the person pushing a trolley around the supermarket is so overwhelmed with different labels anyway that they get label fatigue, if you like. And I think
Yes.
that may be one of the reasons why they're probably more likely to go to a farm shop, but they know that there's something there they can really trust.
Yeah.
So farmers and that community is definitely growing. And I think the way the substitutes have moved towards environmental things we can do on the farm is exactly what it said on the tin. It was about giving the public what the public want, which is
Yes.
birds and buffaloes and hedges and dry stone walls and ponds. And so, in a way, that softens the farmer, the way people perceive farmers, because if we're doing better stuff, whether it's producing food or not producing food, it hopefully makes us more easily trusted. So
Yeah.
we're less like buy a very cheap Thai chicken, more likely to spend a bit more. And that's building all the time.
Yeah, yeah, I could see that. And so when you think about what you've built so far and the impact it's had in Britain and is having, and as you say, is taking information both from within the country and further afield, what's the ambition for Groundswell beyond what you already do?
Yes, it's a very good question. Every year we have people from all over the world who say, "Oh God," and there are imitators cropping up all over the world. And part of our thing would be, it would be great to maybe have to expand and go abroad. We're so busy trying to make sure that we do what we do really well.
Yeah.
We're at that sort of classic stage where, oh, do you really trust anyone else to maintain the brand, if you like? So we're being possibly a little bit too precious about it. But it'd be nice to think that there would be 10 years' time, there would be a Groundswell California and a Groundswell Australia. The hunger is there. The hunger for knowledge is definitely there. It's just really how you can build that. Build the event.
And I'm assuming even though the environment, Australia compared to here, obviously totally different, but I suppose going back to the sort of the basics of what you're trying to achieve, they are shared, even if the environment that you're planting in is different.
Oh, massively. Yeah, massively shared. Australian soils, it's the hottest continent on the planet. Those soils are really delicate soils. And a lot of them are lost already. And a lot of farmers over there are well aware of that. And there's a very good event over there. It's tiny, but it's an event over in Australia that's growing very fast. Because, they know, deep down, they know that they'll do something and do it pretty quick.
You're already influencing lots of people, I know, through the work that you're doing at the moment. But if I were to ask you one thing that you wish every conventional farmer would try just once, what would you advocate to them?
I'm a very bad advocate of it because I'm a nervous, conventional sort of person. But it really is about challenging the status quo. Farming is so dyed in the wool. You're inclined to do what your father did, your mother did, whatever. It's tricky breaking out and challenging your agronomist or challenging your provider by saying you have to be brave and just say I'm going to do something different. Rather like you have with Netwealth, it's a similar thing. You've just got to be brave.
Yeah, actually, in a way, any entrepreneurial venture is asking people to think about whether the status quo is the best answer these days and whether there's a better alternative. So interesting. So, all right. So that's the message to people who haven't yet spent time trying to adopt some of the practices that you're bringing in. And just to finish, Paul, so I think it's very important. There'll be people who will definitely want to come to Groundswell when they listen to this. And I would certainly recommend it. It's a brilliant 2 days. And if you possibly can, get the glamping, book your tent, or bring your tent, one or the other. But just tell me, when is Groundswell this year? What are the dates?
So Groundswell's 1st, 2nd of July. It happens on our farm in North Hertfordshire, ag.com. For tickets. Thank you for that. And there's something for everybody. I think that it's not just for farmers. I think I challenge anybody to be bored at Groundswell. There's plenty of really interesting stuff, whether you're just doing a bit of gardening or if you're interested in the food that you eat or the larger food industry, there's something for everyone. So I hope, I hope it'll that's a show that we're trying to put on. It's something for everyone. We're not just trying to challenge the system and all that. It's much more.
Yeah, I definitely think from my experience of it, I think you do just that, but also you leave with things whirring in your mind about, okay, I've just learned this, and that's fascinating because it's relevant to all of us. Look, it's been brilliant talking to you and such fun to hear about this journey and where we go next, and looking forward to seeing what your next chapter is. So thank you very much for joining me today.
Yeah, thank you, Charlotte. Real honor to be on. So thank you very much indeed.